All right, so today I will, so you will be getting your exams back in your lab, okay? Kat does happen to have yours if you're in her section because she's here. But you'll be getting your exams back in lab. Also during lab there will be a chance to make up points during this week in lab, so you probably want to attend lab this week. You can get up to 20 points back based on how you've on what you've done. There'll be three questions. Choose two, and they will replace those two questions that you had on the exam. So if you got like 5 points and 5. Mind you, it depends, though. If you've got like 5, 5, and 5 for each of those, then maximum you can get back is 10 points, right? If, on the other hand, you completely blew it, you can get back up to 20 points. Most people will probably end up being able to get back 10 points, but that opportunity is there. On a related note, I will be going over some of the questions from the exam today. So because I think I want to just utilize this remaining week for review. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the final exams. Since you guys did so very well on these questions, it's because these questions seem to be, so you guys understand regular expressions, which is fantastic, by the way. I love that. It's great. It also justifies my. I feel very much justified in actually teaching those now. But I wasn't sure if they were a good choice to teach. But you guys need more lists practice and more string practice. So the final exam will probably will focus primarily on list and string manipulation. So that's what we'll be reviewing for the last 2 weeks. Plus the last homework will be review from that. So you've already done some of the exercises from that PDF, but your last homework is to complete all the questions in the PDF and turn that in. So that's going to be good practice. So let's talk about final exams and final exam policies. I find out what time the final exams are the same way I figured everybody else did, but apparently everybody just relies on the professors. I figure it out over here by going to the office of the registrar and noting here and reading this first paragraph is actually quite important. Instructors are encouraged to work out individual accommodations with students who have more than 2 examinations scheduled on one day. So that means that you should not be taking more than 2 exams on a single final exam day. It's quite often I see students register for 3 exams. Don't do that. Your instructors are asked to basically make accommodations for you. Ask one of your instructors, probably the one with the middle exam time to move. And if you can't get any of those 3 instructors to move, you escalate to the dean of students or something like that. Escalate to go above those people because you can. It's stupid to take 3 exams in one day. Very, very, very stupid. I'm exhausted just proctoring these things. Come on. So, all right. So then.
Save yourself the hassle by not trying to ask math to.
Yeah. Math is very.
It's a no and brick wall.
Yeah, math is pretty terrible. I'm pretty good at being able to accommodate you guys if you need to move your exam. I'm very. I can. So yeah, taking it earlier or later will work out. During the fall or spring semesters, final examinations may not be scheduled during the last week of class or on study days. So if your person is giving you an exam this week, but is not giving you a final exam, that's not allowed. That's their final exam.
Wait, can you repeat that?
They can't give you not a it's really fishy if they. I'm not sure if it's actually. Look, they can't. It says over here that during fall and spring semesters, final examinations may not be scheduled during the last week of class or on study days.
Oh, okay.
So if they're
regular exams are fair game?
unless that's replacing their final exam, no. Sorry. if they're not giving you a final exam in addition to that, that would be like they might be trying to dodge around that. But anyway, instructors, yeah, if I've got a special scheduling circumstance, or they tell you you need to come in 9 o'clock at the evening for that exam, unless you were informed of that well in advance and they've cleared it with the dean well in advance, they're making stuff up. I figured you guys should know this because, you know, you have a students at Right and Responsibilities. They are linked in there. It covers all sorts of things, probably including intellectual property law, which actually comes up here. Okay, so all day and evening classes, you click on this link to find that out. So yeah. So here's where I find that out. And we just simply go through and we use this as a guide. So we meet from 2 to 3. It says 3 credit hour courses and 4 credit hour courses, and this is a 4 credit hour course, but it doesn't have our meeting time over there, so I'm going off of the 3 credit hour course. So it says from 2 to 3:20, which is the time we meet, right? Tuesday, Thursday, which means that the exam is going to be on Thursday, 5/2, which is your first exam day. Now that sounds kind of terrible, but that means you can get it out of the way. Trust me from my experience in giving these exams out on the second to last day of finals, where basically the students have done all their final projects and, you know, and been getting everything else out of the right way, and they come to those exams basically not having done the requisite studying. You want to study for this exam. In general, because there's if you come to them when you're basically fresh. But anyway, it's on the 2nd from 1 to 3 o'clock. Okay, so May 2nd, 1 to 3. I will then try to grade these as soon as possible so that you guys will know your grade in this course as soon as possible. Again, grading is on this. The grading curve works for my class is that it's spelled out in the syllabus. But generally, what I do is that you're guaranteed an A if you get 90 or above, B if you're 80 or above, C if you get a 70 or above. And then there's some adjustments that might happen. Like if I'm looking at the courses at the class right now, if you're currently sitting like at an 87 or above, right? If you've got an 87 or above overall score, that's probably an A minus. Whereas if you're going down and then then if you've got like a 77 and above, it's probably a B minus, right? So I don't know as far as how I'll adjust it for scores below a 70. Generally, I do not give Fs if you've been making the attempts to come here and do your work, and not, you know, if you've been turning stuff in, making the attempts. In general, you're not going to get an F. I typically reserve my Fs for people who don't try, because effectively there's no real difference in terms of going to the next class between an F and a D. Anyway, you can use this PDF to find anything you have. There'll also note that basically it also has the list of all common finals, which this one is not. Okay. All right. So my final exam has previously, gone over like questions that deal with, lists and functions and that kind of things. It is cumulative, so there might be some turtle stuff in there, but not too bad. But otherwise, it's going to be fairly straightforward. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions from your second exam. If you had a makeup exam, I haven't had the chance to put your grade in yet, or grade some of you yet. So, also, somebody's missing their very last page, so I have it if you're missing it. Okay, so let me go ahead and go over a couple of the ones that we did. And I don't really want to put the questions on the screen in case I want to reuse these questions later, whatever. I'll just take down the video next year, so that way, so yeah, that makes sense. I'll just take it down next year. I'm lazy. Or maybe I'll just have to, actually change my questions. I know. I try my best not to change questions because when I come up with questions, they're really good. Or like in data structures, when Customs and Border Protection comes up with a question for me and I steal that one. True story. All right, so exam 2. Let me go over this exam because it's worthwhile to do so, and then I'll go over some of the answers for this. All right. Please note that, by the way, this front page did have quite a bit of material on it that was useful, including, and I'll comment back on that. Let's see. Actually, no, this is the wrong exam. This is for Java. That was the Java exam too. My bad. All right, there we go. All right, so 105 points, blah, blah, blah. So all the useful stuff was listed over here. Right, especially the slice part, which I tried to be pretty, I tried to give you guys basically as much as you needed for this. All right, so for this first page, the way it was graded is that basically if you got the dot filled or unfilled correct, you got a point. Right, so technically, if you just left this page blank, you'd be getting some free points. But the main thing that people missed on this one is that this is 0 or more of x, y's. So this matched this one because it basically it's a bunch of x, y's in between x's. So this is valid, right? Because 0 or more of them, and then this is valid. This wasn't, and this wasn't. For this one, the only thing that matched was Andrew at temple.edu. And then there were a couple different ways you could do this one. There were a couple, so to match a regex, the simplest was to do this. Well, sorry, not that one because you need a period, but to do dot plus, which is any character, and that will match literally any string of text. That will match all of them. It will overmatch stuff, but it fulfills the requirements of the question, which is write a regular expression that will match all of them. But in everything else, in the case for everything else, the first thing to note is that this bottom half of the regex, or sorry, everything from the at afterwards was perfectly valid. It matches everything. So it matches at apple.com, temple.edu, temple.edu, and yourmoney.com. So all that needed to be fixed was the stuff beforehand. So you could totally copy that, or you could just basically say, underline this, draw an arrow over there, and then, write the preceding portion, right? Which is that we need to match numbers anywhere and a period. So what we needed to do was replace this beginning portion with and change it from A through Z to A through Z 0 to 9, or if you aren't sure if that would work, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? If you needed to do that. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and period. I didn't take credit off for this, but when it's inside the brackets, you don't need to escape the period. You don't need to do that. Inside the brackets, it literally means it's not a meta character. Same like another way to do that would have been A through Z, or /D, or period, plus, and then the @ sign, and then all that stuff after the @ sign. So there were a couple different ways to do this one. This one I transplanted from an exam in Japan, although they had to write this one. They had to do the same here with write regex because it matched all the examples. I took that out because I wasn't sure you all could write the kanji for yen, which is what this is. But anyway, this is what it is. These are all different valid ways of presenting yen prices, which is roughly about, it's about roughly 110 yen to the dollar. So if you're ever in Japan, honestly, you can just divide the prices by 10 and have a pretty good approximation. So these matched, but this regular expression up here doesn't match commas, and it doesn't match the yen symbol down here. So these two just need to be filled. This one was a bit more strict with grading because it was very similar to an example I gave in class. For this one, each bubble that you got wrong was -2 points. So, the correct ones here were this first one, second one, and the fourth one had to be filled. All right, this one I told you about, and the vast majority of you got it right. Some of you used the variable phone regex by accident. Don't do that. I don't really like that. I can also tell when you're just blindly copying, when you're copying pasting code in a non-blind manner and copying pasting code in a very blind manner. So, and I generally react hostilely to that in the form of zeros. So, I'm just saying that basically, generally, when people copy paste in a blind manner, they generally like use it on a problem that had no bearing on the actual problem at hand. But for this one, you just open up the file, and you just had to open up the file and loop through it. And I'll go over that in the end, because these are the more important ones that I wanted to do. So evens to 0. Given a list of integers, change all the even integers in the list to 0. So surprisingly, a lot of people got this wrong, and I think I just might not have gone over this enough or something, because it was a very common mistake. So I'll write it the way that that I saw it. Okay, so exam2.py. I'm going to go ahead and save this in Classroom. Actually, I'm going to save this not in anything that will get uploaded, so sorry. Because exam2, because, you know, definitely don't want to put these answers online. All right. So, let's go ahead and create a list to test out the code. I'm going to do it wrong first, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I'm just going to pass that list in, and I'm going to, that's going to be answer is equal to that, and then we're going to print our answer. Right? You don't, okay, so let's go ahead and try this. All I cared about, by the way, you didn't have to ever call these methods. All I cared about was you defining the method. So what would go in here? So evens to 0. So the most common mistake I saw was the following. For num in nums, if num mod, sorry, forgot where the percent sign was for a second. If num mod 2 equals 0, which is great. Most people, that the modding by 2 is correct. They would say num is equal to 0. And then they would say return, they would either say return ants. You don't actually have to return anything because of course you're just changing the list. So I might just go, so I might just try this actually by going this way. L is equal to this, evens to 0 L. Yeah. Print L. And if you notice when I run this, it makes no changes whatsoever. And this is because a number gets a copy of that number. To actually change something in a list, you have to go and iterate through it by the indices. So for index in len range nums, yep, sorry, other way around. Range len nums, and let's say, and instead what we do over here is nums index nums index, to do that assignment statement there, to set it equal to 0. So that will actually change the value in there. The first former way I did that, yes?
What does the range len even do in the list?
It goes over the indices. So it says, okay, the list is 5 long, so it goes over the indices 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
If the other way to do this that might be a bit easier, and using the range function is great when you want to only hit specific indices. What I find to be even easier, although it's a bit longer to write, is enumerate. So enumerate numbers will give you for index num enumerate numbers, and that will give you both the value and the number and the index that it's at. Right?
The range overall is that for loop that contains 3 parameters where you're going to start. Second one's where you're going to stop, not included, and the third one's how you're going to step. So you can remember we can do like 7 by 2 or -1 or whatever you have. So that's the range for loop.
So range gives you, this would give you the specific indices. It would go over 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to going over the contents. This one was a bit trickier for students, smallest word beginning. But overall, it's not too different than the find min or find max that we already had, which is as follows. So what we needed was 2 variables, smallest, whatever the smallest word, and let's just go ahead and say it's an empty string, and then smallest word len, which I might just shorten and call smallest len, is equal to 0. And so here we can just use a regular for loop, for word in words. So for each of the words, for each word in the words list, we want to ask ourselves, if length of word is smaller than the smallest length that we found so far, right? If it's smaller than the smallest thing we found so far. And actually, setting the smallest length to 0 actually probably won't work, right? Because, So let's go ahead and maybe just make it like, I don't know. There, that works. Sure, you can just, but point being is that, or you could make it the length of the first thing, right? Another way to do that is say, probably better, yeah, you're right. A better, more straightforward way is to say the first thing and then length of smallest word. So if the word is smaller than the smallest word we found so far, then congratulations, word is our new smallest word. So we would say smallest word, assuming I could spell, apparently, smallest word is equal to word, and smallest len is equal to len of word. Okay, and the reason, I mean, you don't necessarily need the smallest length. You can do it just with smallest word by doing the following. Instead of doing smallest word over here, you would go, a smallest length over here, you would go len smallest word. So there's various ways that I've seen this done, and there's various ways you could do it. This shortens it by a couple lines. So if the length of the word is less than the smallest word, great, that's the new smallest word. We don't want to return the word, though. We want to return the first 3 letters, which means we want to slice 0 through 3. If you put just :3, that also works. But that will get you the first 3 letters. Yep. The smallest word. Okay. Now, so this page was the one that I think the students had, that you guys had the, sorry, this page was the one you guys had the most trouble on. This page and the last page. Specifically this question, the alternating sum. Given a list of integers, compute and return the alternating sum of elements, which a lot of students had trouble parsing, but the examples make it actually kind of, if you read the examples, it helps. What this will do is that if I pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will return 3 because 3 is the value that you get when you start with, when you go 1 minus 2 plus 3 minus 4 plus 5. So we start with 1, then -2, then 3, then -4, then 5. Similarly with 0, 10, 20, we do 0 minus 10 plus 20, which gives us 10. And then 9, 9, 9, 9 gave us 0 because it was 9 minus 9 plus 9 minus 9. So it alternates between adding numbers and subtracting numbers. That was the key there. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this one, once you realize that it's just alternating between adding and subtracting numbers. Okay, def alternating word. Okay, so for this one, what you want to do is you want to use nums, okay? And, right, normally we could do this like a running sum if we were just doing a regular sum. Total is equal to 0, return total, and then do for num in nums total plus equals num. But this doesn't really help us too much, right? Because what we want to do is that we want to add and then subtract and then add and subtract, right? So one way to do this is that we can have a Boolean value to tell us whether we're adding this time and then subtracting it, okay? So, so I'm going to teach you a couple cool things we can do here with this, actually. So first, let's go ahead and say, let's create an adding variable and say adding is equal to true, okay? And so what we're going to do is say, hey, if adding is true, so if adding is true, we'll add number to total. But if it's not true, which we could do with a different if statement, or we can just do else. So if adding equals true, or you could just do if adding, right? Otherwise, what we'll do is that we'll just subtract it. Now, mind you, this will just simply do adding. This will just always add it, right? So what we need to remember is that when we're adding, next time what do we want to do? We want to subtract, so we'll say adding is equal to false after we add a number. Similarly, when we subtract a number, we want to add next time, so we'll say adding is equal to true. Does this make sense to everybody? We can just flip it. Of course, we know we're going to flip every time, so we can actually shorten this by removing the adding is equal to true and adding is equal to false, and we can actually use a nifty little trick if we know how, which is that we can say adding is equal to not adding. Which, what? Okay, let me kind of show you that one. Python 3, this one's just, once you understand it, it makes a ton of sense, right? So we can say B is equal to true, right? So B is equal to, so B, true. So if I said not B, it would give me false, right? So if I say B is equal to not B, it gives me, we first evaluate on the right, not B, which would be false, and we store it in B. So now B is false. And then if I say B is equal to not B again, we get true. So B is equal to not B, or a Boolean is equal to itself but notted, we'll flip it for you, which is nice. It will just simply, so that just shortens it by one line, but makes it a bit more confusing to read. Okay? So that was one way to do it. The other way you could do this one is that you could rely off of the insight that for this problem, we are adding an element, right? Then we're subtracting, then we're adding, but we're always adding the even indices and we're subtracting the odd indices. So if instead what we do, so instead we could totally do it like this. We could instead do it by going for index in range length of numbers, so go over all the indices from 0 to the last index. If index mod 2 equals 0, so if the index is even, we want to add that number to the total. Total plus equals index. Now some students, they remembered about the index thing, but they tried to use it in a for num and nums loop. So if you remembered about the index and figured that out, then that was like 7 points. If you forgot how to, if you just kind of had issues with that, then and forgot how to differentiate, you got half credit. So else, if the index is odd, total is equal to, well, not I, but that's what happens when I start typing, or start talking when I'm typing. Nums index total minus equals nums index, and return total. So there, basically, we're saying if we're at an even index, we add. If we're at an odd index, we're going to subtract. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Next problem was what? All right, so this one was actually a lot shorter and easier than a lot of people made it out to be. So let's go ahead and just grab April 6th, 1958, okay, and just play around with it, okay? All right, so let's see what I could do. So what I want to get 1958 to be, April 6th, 1958 to be, is I want it to be 1958 / month / day, right? I wanted to go from month, day, year to year, month, day, right? Again, if you couldn't tell from the Japan-related questions, these were questions that I gave in an exam when I was teaching in Japan. So it made them kind of relevant here, but they still serve very good questions here. So 4/6/1958. So what I want to do is I want to take this string over here and put it right over here with the slash over here. So really, this one's actually not too bad. What I want to do is that if S is, so our date, let's say, what was it? It was date. So really what we wanted to do is that we could actually do this in one line. First off, we wanted the year first. So the year, let's go ahead and write down our indices. Our year started at index 6, so date 6 to the end will give me the year, right? And then we wanted that followed by a slash. And then we needed to follow that by month and day. So, and month and day goes up through here, up through index 4, so date 0 to 5, because it gets the first 5 characters over there. And I'm leaving out this final slash over there, and so this will, so that's really all you needed. There were, you could do this in a couple more lines, by the way, and like just set stuff to variables, and plenty of people did get it right. But you can do it in just one line like that. And this was a callback to the Pig Latin homework, essentially. All right, it's almost as though that I chose my examples and problems deliberately. All right. People overthought this one. The is val. Some people use regular expressions. That's great. You didn't need to. But for is val, that was fairly straightforward. If so, def is val. This was going to take in a single character. So C, right? So a string of length 1, and so we could just simply say if A, so you could do if C is equal to A, or C is equal to E, right? And then you could go return true, otherwise return false, right? And so on and so forth with that one. Or you could use a abbreviated version of that and say C is, if C is in A, E, I, O, U, and if you put in the capitalization or left capitalization out, didn't really affect my things. I was assuming everything was lowercase, so no worries there. A, E, I, O, U, return true, otherwise return false. You could also just shorten that even further to going return that expression, return C in AEIOU, right? Which will return true if it's in true, or false if it's in false, because that's a Boolean expression. For most vowels, that was essentially the same as doing the min-max one, where basically, sorry, not the min-max, but the smallest word beginning. Basically, you had a counter, but for this one, you needed to write a nested for loop. So here, what you had to do with the nested for loop was as follows. Let's call it most valley, right? Most valley word and num vowels is equal to 0. Okay? So for word in words, actually, let's go with, yeah, and then let's go with count over here is equal to 0, which will be the count of the number of vowels that are in that in word, right? So then we have to say for letter in, so for every word in the list, for every letter in the word, if letter, and we can use the function we just wrote, is val. So if is val letter, count plus equals 1, increment by 1. And then when we're done with that, with going through all the letters, we can ask ourselves, hey, if count is greater than the number of vowels that we have, guess what? Now we have a new letter, a new word with the most vowels. Most valley is equal to word, and the num vowels is equal to the count. And then, now that we're done, we want to return the word with the most vowels, so return most valley. I'm not going to bother going over the next one. That one was from the first exam. The digit product. That one was still from the first exam. And moving on to the last question, real life, which was about flagging white supremacist accounts. True story, by the way, about 1488 and 1488 being code words used by neo-Nazis to signal each other online. So that one is fairly straightforward to handle. Let's call this filter.py. All right. Now, given a list of usernames, so def toxic, given a list of usernames, we want to go and iterate through them and return a list of all the users who are potentially toxic, right? Just because your username ends with 88 doesn't necessarily mean you are a white supremacist. You could easily have been born in the year 1988, but like swastikas and pencil mustaches, Nazis ruin everything. So anyway, so let's go ahead and say output is equal to an empty list, right? Because that's where we're going to collect our stuff, and we'll return it at the end. And now we have to go through each username and detect whether or not they're toxic. So this could be done with a regex, or it could be done fairly simply using simple if statements. I'll go ahead and do both. So for username, or let's go ahead and say for name in username, it's plural, So for each user there, we want to see if they are a toxic user. So one way to do it with regular expressions is assuming we've got RE imported. So I'll go ahead and put it up here. If you didn't import RE, I was just working out the assumption that it was automatically imported, so you didn't ever have to import it. So, but since I'm coding, import RE. Toxic regex is equal to re.compile, and then we want to see the pattern R, and then it ends with, so it's either got to end with 14, so 14 or an 88 or a 1488, and then it ends, then the file ends, or sorry, the line ends, or you use a word boundary over here to end it. I'll go ahead with the end of a line special symbol. So if it ends with those, then great. And then we can go and say, hey, if toxic regex dot search name, if that comes up true, then we want to add our name to the output. Output dot append name. And that's pretty much all we need to do for that one. Another way we can do it is we can iterate through it and say, hey, if name, and we want to get the last two characters, right? So how would I get the last two characters? So if name -2 to the end is equal to, another way to do that is len of name -2 to the end is equal to 14, or name of len 2 to the end is 88, or len 2 is not 2, but 4 this time is 1488, then that's a toxic user, or potentially toxic. Well, 1488 is definitely toxic.
What we already have gotten it by the middle one?
Huh?
What we already have defaulted to get it by the 88?
Yeah, I suppose I would have. And then you can just simply do output.append name again. Another thing you could have done is that you could have put everything into a string, I suppose, and you could have done maybe you could have used find all, but honestly, I think this way was the most accurate way to do it, using the regular expression or the if statement. All right, any questions? All right, so 3 of those questions you'll get an opportunity to replace the grade on Tuesday. You choose 2 of the 3 to do so, since I wanted to be fair rather than just giving 1 page. I'm giving you 3 problems and saying, hey, just choose which 3 to replace for your grade, because that will depend on, on how well you did. So let's see. But for right now, we've gone over most of our curriculum. The only thing I was hoping to target was Excel files, but I didn't really get the chance to go through those, so oh well. So let's go ahead and take a look at, so let me go ahead and see. So again, what am I going to be covering on our final? It's cumulative, so generally for the final exam, which I've never really given practice final exams for the finals, but That's generally because I cop out and I say the easy way to go and look up final exams is final exam Python or AP Computer Science exam, and I totally steal the PDFs, or file. Is it file type or file? I wonder for file PDF. See if that works. File type. Oh, there we go. Final exam Python PDF. There we go. One from Berkeley, review from UIC, UC Davis, LUC. I'm lazy, but you know, that it helps. It's all about about automating this cell. So here we go. Structure and interpretation of computer programs. Is that Wizard Book? It is Wizard Book. Okay. So some of these will talk about objects and stuff like that, which, right, if you totally don't understand stuff like this, then that's perfectly fine. They sometimes go over different things, especially if it's a more accelerated class. But let's see. Let's see. Final exam. That's fairly straightforward. All right. So review questions for Python 1.2. What are each of these things? Some of these we didn't go over. That's perfectly fine. Here we go. Write a Python function called mean. It takes in a single parameter, a list of integer values. It returns the arithmetic mean of the values of the list. For full credit, use only one loop and do not use any of the built-in functions. For extra credit, create a second implementation using the built-in functions. Hint, the extra credit one is 2 lines long, including the definition line, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So by mean, of course, they mean what? The average, right? The arithmetic mean or the average, right? So I think I've gone over this one, but hey, it's a good question. Might as well do it again. So let's go ahead and say classroom, ITP, review, classroom, ITP, final review.py. Okay, so def mean is, it's going to take in a list of numbers, right? And so what we want to do is that we want to do this in one loop. So the mean is the sum of all the numbers divided by however many numbers we added up. So let's just do a running sum. Total is equal to 0. For number in L, total plus equal to number. Right? That adds up all the items into the total. Then we have to do the total number of numbers divided by how many numbers, the total sum divided by the total number of numbers. It said not to use any built-in functions, so I guess that means I have to count however many numbers there were too. I guess length is technically a built-in function. Count is equal to 0, so count plus equals, so each time we add a number, we'll increase count by 1 to say, hey, we added a number. The total is equal to, and then we'll return total divided by count. Okay, which is the average. Of course, that begs the question of what happens if L is empty. So mean. So let's just try this. Print mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. This will print out the average of that. End of file while parsing. Forgot a parentheses over there. That'll give me 3.0. Of course, if I just pass it an empty list, what's going to happen? It's going to say division by 0. Right? So let's just go ahead and review a second what's going to happen when you with Python and dividing stuff by 0. 4 divided by 0 gives you a you cannot divide by 0 error. If you do 4 divide by 0, going to give you can't divide by 0. If I do 4.0 divide by 0, it'll give me can't divide a float by 0. If I divide 0 by 0, it's also going to give me a divide by 0 there. Right? Dividing by 0 just doesn't work in Python. In other programming languages, 0 by 0 can actually give you different answers. So for instance, if you're working in Java, it's worthwhile to note that if you do 5 divide by 0, it's going to give you divide by 0, but if I do 5.0 divide by 0, it gives me infinity, because that's the way integer arithmetic works according to the IEEE standard. If I do 0 divide by 0, it gives me can't divide by 0, but if I do 0.0 divide by 0.0, it will give me not a number. So Python's easy, though, because it just simply says, no, you can't divide by 0. Okay, of course, maybe if I divide by 0.0, maybe I'll get something. Python 3, 0 divide by, so 0.0 divide by 0.0 gives me, still can't divide by float. Okay, so Python is very explicit. You cannot divide by 0. Don't even think about it. Okay, all right, so let's talk about the extra credit for this one, which is okay. Now without any built-in functions. It should be 2 lines long, including the definition statement. Meaner. Okay. So that's fairly simple. I need the total of all the numbers added. Sum of L. Divide by however many numbers are in L. Len of L. Very, very short if you know your Python inbuilt functions. In fact, let's go ahead and meet them in case you haven't had the chance to go and peruse them. Because, again, anything is fair game. And I will not tell you the number of times I've learned about a function but because somebody learned about it and then put it down on the test, and then I looked it up to make sure it was a real thing, like an add-all method. All right, so built-in types. Let's see, standard types. Those are built-in functions. Functions, Python. Here we go. Site. So there is a bunch here which look really weird. We've got abs, which unfortunately do not give you a six-pack, but instead refer to absolute value. All, if all the things are, return if all elements are iterable. So in other words, if everything in there is, you can go over, that's weird, any. Bin, which converts it into binary, which is great. So if you ever were curious as to what a binary number was, you can use the bin function. Python 3. One thing that I am quite fond of in the final exam is giving you something I haven't taught you before and teaching it to you on the final exam, giving you basically a paragraph that says, here's this thing, here's how you use it to solve this problem. So, for instance, I could give you, if I told you the binary command gives you binary number was, so if I give it a number, 3 is equal to, so the 0b just means that, hey, this is a binary number, pay attention. And then the binary number for 3 is 1, 1, because it's 1, 2 plus 1, 1. Binary number for 4 is 1, 0, 0, so 0, 1, so 1, 0, 0, because it's 1, 4, 0, 2s, and 0, 1s. So, gets really weird for like negative numbers though. Negative 4 is, well, I guess not. You can also, but you can get these, this binary stuff, it's pretty useful. So, let's see if what happens if I do binary 4 plus binary 8. Can we see what happens here? Is it just going to give me a string? Am I going to get an error? I'm just going to get concatenation because, of course, I'm concatenating two strings together. So not too much I can do there, but it's kind of useful. So bool returns a Boolean value, true or false. Basically says whether it's true or false. CHRI, which gives you the Unicode which gives you the Unicode code thing. So if you give it character of 97, that converts 97 to A. Basically it says, given this Unicode type, right? We've learned about this. Given this digit, give me the equivalent number, whereas ORD says, given this character, ORD says, given this character, give me the number that's associated with it, and character says, give me this character, give me this number, give me the character associated with it. Class, compile, blah, 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 complex, dir, enumerate we've learned about, which is pretty nice. Executive, filter, construct an iterator from elements from those iterable in which function returns true. So this is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and just see this. Because it gets into something we've not done in Python, which is saying that basically that class that, and this can help you later on, and actually these functions can really help you on the exam. Python breaks a lot of rules that other programming languages try to say, like functions can't be passed as variables in other programming languages. Python, however, says, why not? So let's go ahead and make a very simple function. So I'm going to call this classroom. So time to teach you a bit of functional programming in the last 20 minutes. Functional.py. Def f of x, right? That should look fairly familiar to everybody, an f of x, right? Let's define f of x is equal to 2x. So in other words, if I give you x, you're going to give me 2 back, right? Or twice as much back. So print f of 5. This is going to print out 10, right? No worries there. Give me 50, I'm going to give you 100. Give me some gobbledygook, I'm going to give you twice that gobbledygook, right? Make sense to everybody? Okay. So let's go ahead and just do something here. So there's nothing preventing me in Python, although there is in other languages because they're very type strong, that says let's go ahead and call this my function is equal to f. Okay? And now I'll say my function, right? And what this is this is just saying that my function is another name for f now. Make sense to everybody? So now if I call my function, it's going to bring me to f, right? Make sense? Great. And so now that we've established that I can use that as a name without calling it, let's go ahead and see what we can do with it, right? There's got to be a reason for this. So let's suppose I want to write a function called remove evens, right? I don't just want to turn all the evens to 0. I want to remove all the evens from a list. Okay, def remove evens. So let's go ahead and think about this. So basically what I have to do is that this ends up being actually kind of a nasty problem. So given a list, first off, how do I remove something from a list? Python 3. So L is equal to 1, 2, 3. Is there a L dot remove 2? Okay, there is. It removed index, sorry, it didn't remove index 2, it removed the value 2. Yeah, that's kind of worrisome. Right? It removed index 2. It didn't remove index 2, it removed the value 2. So if I try removing -1, it will remove, it's not in the list. So it's going to remove a value from it, not the index, which can be a bit tricky. Now Not only that, when you remove something, of course, the indices all change. So if you're trying to iterate over it, you're going to get a huge error in Python. You can't change what you're iterating over. Let's go ahead and just try it. For num in L, right? If num mod 2 equals 0, L dot remove num. That's really it, right? So let's go ahead and do remove evens L. Remove evens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not even going to print it out. Oh, hey, it worked. My bad. So let's go ahead and see what happened. None. Okay. Maybe you have to return. Hey, let's go ahead and return L and see what it gives me. 1, 4, 3, 4. Okay, so it will work because we're lucky. But what if I do instead this? 1, 1, 2, 2. If I have 2 2s in a row, it actually becomes quite a bit of a mess because what happens is I remove a 2 and then it shifts down and I skip over it. It ends up being this whole thing. It's kind of nasty. I could do it. I could make an if a while, but honestly, I want to show how filter works, which is quite simple. Filter says, given a function, if it. So what does filter say? It says, given a function so in other words, given a function, and if it fails the test, if it returns true, keep it. If it returns false, throw it out of the list. So let's go ahead and show you how this works. Def is even x, so return x mod 2 equals 0. Okay, that will return true if x is even, false in other words. So to remove evens, I can actually do this. Return. So this will make. I swear to. Let me just start with the filter. Filter is even. So the function I'm passing is even, the function name over there, and applying it to L. And then I'm going to return my result into a list. Remove evens L. 1, 2. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10. Okay. So ants is equal to that. Print ants. See? Oh! So filter removed everything that was odd. Why does it do that? Because it keeps whatever was true. And is even was true. So instead what I would like is actually an is odd function. So if it's odd, throw it, if it's odd, keep it. So if odd, change this to 1, and filter. Basically, if it fails this test, the is odd test, it's going to get thrown out now. That's pretty nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the most powerful, probably the most powerful function in computer science, or at least the most powerful function that Python has available, which is the map function, which is probably way above what you should be learning right now, but who cares? Honestly, not me. It's really cool, which is basically saying that, hey, so I wrote this function up here, by the way, that's f of x, right? It doubles a number, right? But suppose, though, that I've got a list of numbers, right? Let's go ahead and create a list of numbers. L is equal to, let's see, L is equal to list range 500. Let's go ahead and say that's list range 1 to 100 by 5s. Right, suppose I've got this list L. Okay, which is basically 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, you know, that's all it is. That's all that number did. It's just went up by 5s. Everybody see that so far? Suppose I've got this list L. Let's say that actually what I would really like is I'd like to double all the values in that list. Well, I've got this handy dandy function, right, that will do that, right? So what I could do is that I could write something like this, you know, for I in range of length of L, right? So go over all the indices in L, and then I could say L of I is equal to, the I thing in L is equal to F of I, right? So that'll double it. So that will double everything. But actually there's a really cool way we can actually apply this, which is the map function. Instead what we can do is that we can say map, I want to, and what map says, I want to apply this function, f, which remember doubles everything, to L. Now if I set that to L, it's going to give me out like saying it's a map object. What you have to do is that once you pass something into a map, if you want it to be a list, you have to turn it into a list. But what this does, it says, what the map function does is says, hey, apply this function to everything in the list. Which is pretty awesome, actually. It's really, really, really awesome. So, I mean, especially if I basically, you know, if I use a more complicated function, it's powerful. Let's see, Control F map. So, let's see. So, all right. So I gave it a function, and I just told it to double everything with that L has. Right, and that's what it does because F doubles everything there. All right, so yeah, I did. Okay. Any questions about this so far? I just want to make sure I don't lose anybody on this because it's a bit, because it might get a bit much in a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and say though that I've given a list of numbers. You want to let's see. Yeah, so now we want to double it, but now say now that it's doubled, I'd like to get the sum of everything. So you can using map and using a lot of the built-in functions, you can actually do quite a bit of you know, stuff over there. Another thing we could do is say, hey, yes. Yes. And there is a cheat sheet allowed on the final was the question. So, so yes, there is a cheat sheet allowed. Let's see. Map. Let's see. I'm blanking on a good example for this. So map example Python. I don't need a lambda function, but oh, that's a good one. So suppose we have a function that, let's go ahead and go back to this. So similar, def let's suppose we need to write a function that converts Celsius to Fahrenheit, right? Or converts Fahrenheit to Celsius. F to C, right? What's the formula for that? Anybody remember? I don't remember. Fahrenheit to Celsius, right? I think it's like 5/9 minus 32. Fahrenheit to Celsius, come on. Yeah. Fahrenheit is equal to Celsius times Celsius is equal to F minus 32 times 5/9. Okay. So F minus 32. So say we want to convert some some number to Fahrenheit. So from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So we would return F minus 32 plus times 5 divided by 9. Okay, and again, say we have this time a list of numbers, where L is a list of numbers that are, temperatures. So let's say 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Say you really want to know what temperatures those are, you can just simply, instead of writing a for loop, you can use the map function to do F to C. And it will go ahead and convert them automatically for you. Although I think I must have messed it up some. No. Let's go ahead and see what 0 would give us. So 0 gives me negative, and let's see, 32 gives me this. All right. I think one more question before we're done. Let's see. Write a Python function called word count, which takes in one string parameter and should be, this is word count, so it's just counts the number of reason contents, print out the line count, the word count, and how many characters, and the input file name. Got it. So it says, hey, I want you to print out, given a file name, I want to know how many words it has in it, how many characters it has in it, and how many lines, how many words, and how many characters it has in it. So that's, and for extra credit, only open the file once per function call. Okay. So what we want to do for that one is, let's see, def word count, right? File name. So given a file name, what do we want? We want 0. So we want basically num lines, num cars, num words, right? And honestly, they're all fairly, so figuring out the number of lines is fairly easy in a file. Figuring out the number of characters is fairly easy. Words can be a bit more tricky, but I think I'm gonna cheat there and use regular expressions because why not? Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is open. So let's go ahead and see here. So data is equal to open file name. We want to open it in read mode. And what we'll do is that we say, let's first figure out how many lines we need to print out, okay? Which is first, for line in lines, well, that makes it fairly for line in data, that makes it fairly straightforward. Each time we read a line, I'll increase num lines by 1. That was easy enough. That's 1/3 of this one down. Next, number of characters. Well, that's the number of characters that are in the line, so num cars is equal to, it should be plus equals the length of the line. Read a line, count how many characters are in it, because the character, a line is a string. I could also do a for loop and say, oh, for every letter in there, boom. But the question is, how do I figure out what's a word? Well, let's see. Do we get to assume that it's got everything? That it's got a. So, do we get to assume that basically that every line has a word in it? I mean, honestly, with regular expressions, I don't really have to. What I can do instead is say word regex is equal to, how does a word look? It looks like this. re.compile word, let's see, r/w plus, right? That's what a word looks like, right? Anything that's a 0, that's an alphanumeric character or an underscore. That's what a word looks like. Okay, and then if I do word reg, and then let's say words is equal to word regex dot find all, which will give me a list of all the things that match this regular expression in the line, right? But I don't actually need to parse through it. That will give me all the words in there, right? So all I have to say is num words is equal to plus equals len of words. So honestly, that makes that fairly straightforward to do. And then he wanted me to return that with num lines, comma, num, and then what was the order? Num line, num words, num characters. Num words, num characters, and then the file name. File name. Or it was a print, but whatever. So, let's go ahead and just test it out in the last minute we have left. See, where was it separated at? Do you like? Okay, save, classroom, ITP, seuss, seuss.txt, and now if we do word count, seuss.txt, 521.93. All right, so we will be reviewing more on Thursday, so I'll see you then. And I do have office hours today, like always.